Hey, Stan Deaton with the Georgia Historical Society. Welcome back. 156 years ago, this week, in May of 1864, the American Civil War had been going on for 3 long years. The Confederates realized that they were probably not going to be able to win the grand battle that would win them independence, but they might be able to win their independence simply, like Washington during the Revolution, by not being beaten, by holding on longer than the enemy was willing to fight. They felt particularly if they could hold on until the presidential election in November of 1864, Lincoln might lose his bid for re-election and a new American president might be more willing to capitulate to the war weariness in the northern states and end this conflict by negotiation. A couple of things had to happen in order to make that possible. One was the Confederates had to hold on to their capital in Richmond until November, and they had to hold on to the South's second most important city in Atlanta, the railroad and industrial hub of the Deep South, where ammunition was made, food was produced, all this stuff shipped out all over the Confederacy. Now, Ulysses S. Grant had been brought by Lincoln back east in March of 1864 and given command of all the U.S. armies. And he put together a grand strategy that spring to push the Confederates hard on all fronts. So Admiral David Farragut steamed into Mobile Bay. Grant himself was going to lead the overland campaign in Virginia to Richmond. And in the Deep South, he gave William Tecumseh Sherman command of all of the U.S. armies between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River. So the Army of the Cumberland under George Thomas, the Army of the Tennessee under James McPherson, and the Army of the Ohio under John Schofield were all brought together outside Chattanooga, 110,000 strong, and in May of 1864, Sherman began his push south from Chattanooga toward Atlanta, along the route that is today roughly I-75. Now, opposing him was a Confederate army of about 55,000 strong under General Joseph Johnston. Johnston was a notoriously unaggressive and somewhat timid general. And Sherman knew this and was counting on it. Sherman, of course, also had a 2-to-1 numerical advantage. He had a strong supply line going back to Chattanooga and then on to Nashville and parts farther north to keep his army well supplied, and he had morale. His army was fighting strong after defeating the Confederates in Chattanooga. They went on the move that May, and in a series of engagements between May of 1864 and September, the U.S. Army pushed the Confederates farther south in increments back toward Atlanta. Sherman always managed to outflank left or right Joseph Johnston's army. Only once did he lose his patience with the flanking maneuver and attack Johnston head-on at Kennesaw Mountain on June 27th with disastrous results. President Jefferson Davis of the Confederacy was afraid that Johnston was going to surrender Atlanta without firing a shot. So on July 18th, he sacked him. He put General John Bell Hood in charge. Hood was a much more aggressive commander. He came out of his defenses and attacked Sherman's army at several points around Atlanta, most famously at the Battle of Peachtree Creek, the Battle of Atlanta, the Battle of Ezra Church. Nevertheless, he was able to push Hood's army back into Atlanta under siege, and on September 2nd, the U.S. Army captured the South's second most important city. 2 months later, Lincoln was reelected, and a few weeks after that, Sherman cut himself off from his supply line and marched across Georgia to Savannah, where his army became an army of liberation for enslaved people. He captured Savannah in December and presented it notoriously to President Lincoln as a Christmas present, and that spelled the end of the Confederacy for all intents and purposes. It all began 156 years ago this week. It's safe to say that 2020 is a year Georgians will always remember. 1864 was a year that changed Georgia forever. Stay safe, stay strong. I'm Stan Deaton with the Georgia Historical Society. Thank you for watching.